Welcome to the T2 Hubcast. Join Martin, Dave, Spencer and guests as they discuss all things personal and professional development. The T2 Hubcast, brought to you by the People Performance People.
Welcome to another T2 Hubcast with me, Martin Johnson, and today I've got a great guest with me. I've been trying to get her on for months. It's probably fair to say. And at probably the third or fourth attempt, I've finally got her to get into the office and record a Hubcast with me. So I have Carolyn Woolway, who is, let me just get this job title right now, the head of HR for the UK.
And Ireland for Siemens Gamesa.
And Ireland for Siemens Gamesa. Siemens Gamesa has sort of come together over the last few years. It used to be Siemens from a wind farm perspective, wind power perspective, merged with Gamesa, is that right? Or acquired Gamesa, or was it merged?
It was a merger. So Siemens were really strong on offshore wind. Gamesa were very strong on onshore wind, and the two together are obviously have formed a merger, which is great.
So it sort of sits separate outside of the Siemens group, really. And Siemens Gamesa is its own brand now, isn't it?
It's its own legal entity. We're still obviously part of the family, but it's its own legal entity.
Awesome. So I've known Carolyn for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
A couple of years. We met a couple of years back. We did a bit of work together. I had the pleasure of coming in and working with some of your leaders within Siemens in the early days of the operation being set up. And we've done various events together and stayed in touch since. And one of the things that I was always impressed with was Carolyn's views as a head of HR around the cultural piece in organisations. I think from the start, I observed you felt really passionately about creating the right environment and culture within the organisation. I mean, by the sheer nature of what you do, it's operationally focused. It's about execution. It's about manufacturing blades. It's about quality. It's about safety and all of the great things that you usually get within a manufacturing organisation, but an engineering organisation. But you still felt passionately about the people and the cultural element, which really struck a chord with me. So I wanted to get Carolyn on today just to loosely discuss a few of those areas and get some of your thoughts. And I'm sure the managers and the leaders listening to this on the hub will find it of interest. So shall we just see where we go with it?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely. So first question then, Carolyn. I talked about culture then. How important is the right culture in an organisation for you? Why did you feel quite strongly from the start that it's all well and good being specialists and experts in what we do and being well known for Siemens world-class processes and manufacturing, safety and all the great stuff that you do. But why did you want to set your stall out on culture from the start?
For me, it was massively important because at the time we were setting up a brand new site. So it was a clean slate. It was a blank canvas, which is a massively, I think probably once in a career lifetime opportunity to get the culture right. And for me, if you can set the tone, if you can really create a sense of purpose and a vision and articulate that well and hire the right people that embody that and role model it, for me, that's you're on the right foot from the very get-go. And then, since then on our journey, we've had a merger. So we've had two very, very different companies coming together with pockets of different cultures. So again, we've had to really work on that. And that's been really challenging because, you've got two established businesses. And then, you're trying to move them away from their current culture into something that's brand new. And again, it's incredibly important that that's rolled out in each of the countries.
Yeah.
And that's consistent. And again, there's that clear vision, mission, and kind of sense of purpose, which for a renewables company, it's a dream because you've got that. You've got, it's a green company. You're kind of saving the world type message. So.
And do you think you had an advantage with this because in what you do, i.e. wind power and the blade process, the manufacturing of the blade process, because it is quite niche and unique that you weren't bringing in people to the organisation from the start who had the skills already. You were sort of bringing in the right people and you were skilling them. Is that fair to say?
That's right. I was very, very keen to make sure that we weren't recruiting people with just the technical skills to do the job, that actually what was more important was that having people with the right value set, the right mentality to come in and, really drive the business and be ambassadors for the brand and work with us in a way that, you can train technical skills. You can't always train the, that X factor. We kept calling it the X factor.
Yeah, and the character and the traits and the natural, the natural attitudes of the people who you want in the. So, and that's why
the type of person who walks down the car park and picks up the piece of litter and puts it in the bin.
Yeah.
Just that.
Yeah,
you can't describe it really, but just that.
And you know what? That comes with other challenges, because when you get all the right people, or when you try to get all the right people, because it's never sort of totally foolproof. You've got, some people fall by the wayside or slip through the net. But when you take that, you sort of cater for the cultural piece, but then you've got a huge upskilling period. So you was almost willing to say from the start, if we get the right people, we're still going to have a really 6 to 12 month journey on breaking a few eggs from a capability perspective, because we've got to skill these people in what we do as well.
Yeah.
Most organizations I work with fall down on culture because they hire skills and experience from other industries or from the same industry, but they don't really do the character piece. So actually they've got the capability, but it becomes a very negative, toxic environment very quickly because they've got the wrong people. You had the opposite. Yours was, we've got good people, but we've got to do the job as well.
We did. And what was really interesting to me was you got people from environments where there was no trust in the businesses that they'd come from. That they were used to a blame culture. They were used to people pointing fingers. So there was a real fear of coming up with new ideas or taking accountability for things, because in their past, in their histories, they'd worked with leaders who had pointed fingers and, really created an environment where they were just there to put widgets in boxes. And, trying to instill that sense of trust and loyalty and actually just take a risk, just do it, just if you need something, go and buy it, that type of just do it. When we first set up, that was probably one of the most challenging things. And if you remember, that's why we ran the leadership program, was to get that accountability and that trust and that kind of, teamwork going, and to help our managers understand that actually they needed to create that sense of trust in the business.
Well, let's come on to my next point then. So leadership, you mentioned. It was all right setting up an environment and visualizing the environment you wanted to foster. It's then another thing putting a load of what we think is good people into that environment. But very quickly it can be undone, as we've just said. So you have to have a very, very capable leadership team in, but a very humanistic leadership team in, who are willing to win the hearts and minds of those people in the early days. Now, the one thing that I've observed in Siemens is, like any project and like any large environment where you drop close to 1,000 people in one environment at any one time, you get some churn from a staff level. But the one thing you seem to have had is you've had a bit of a spine and a backbone to the senior leadership team and the sort of, the group leads and the team leads. And that's not changed very much. And that creates stability. Yes, there's been a few that's changed on the leadership team. But in general, you could look at the mainstays and say, we have had some consistency with certain people, which has allowed us to keep that messaging going. And that's really important. So I guess my question is how important is the leadership element in that cultural piece? Is it the most important thing?
I think so. But then I'm biased because I'm a human resources professional. But for me, if you have a good leadership team that people want to follow for the right reasons, not because of fear and intimidation, but because that those people have got the best intentions for you. You know that they're not out to promote themselves. They're there to help. They're there to develop others. That they're humble. The types of people I see being successful in our leadership team now are the ones that actually will put their hands up and admit they don't know everything about everything.
Humility. Yeah.
They're willing to completely open their minds constantly to further develop themselves and constantly learn. They don't get to a point where they think, I know everything about everything and I'm, wonderful. I don't need to develop anymore. And I think those two together, along with the being able to tell the story and win the hearts and minds, and that for me, that's what I see in the successful people.
Yeah, because you can be very good at your job and very credible and knowledgeable in your sphere of expertise, but if you then live in that black and white world completely, where you crack the whip, you drive by outputs, and you have no human connection with people or no humility, as credible as you are and as good as you are, you're gonna encounter some problems very quickly if you take that line.
Yeah.
Certainly in an environment where traditionally your operatives and your staff have come from working class industries where they've been beaten with sticks for a while.
Exactly.
Does that make sense? So building that trust is key, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, who would you want to follow? Someone who's going to throw you under a bus, or someone who's going to be there and has got your back? And I think that's what we've really tried to create, are leaders who care about their people and, really deliver. The delivery is incredibly important as well, obviously.
Of course it is,
they need to deliver, and not everyone survived that journey.
And you make a good point there for anybody listening to this who's in an environment where you are under pressure to deliver on what you do and on your area. You're ultimately employed by the organizations who do that. You're ultimately, when all said and done, employed to deliver the outputs and the outcomes that you need to deliver in the job role. So we're not saying that that's secondary. What we're saying is that's always going to be the key performance indicator. But if you want to deliver that and deliver it consistently, having the human cultural element side of your leadership capability is what's going to be the vehicle to allow you to do that consistently long term. Because we always say you can hit with the big stick, you can deliver a directive, aggressive message, and you will drive an outcome in the moment, but at what cost? Whereas the art of leadership is to say, how can I create an environment and a team where that can almost just be self-perpetuating through their commitment and their engagement to the cause, rather than me having to hit them with that stick.
Yeah, completely.
And I think that's what you're trying to create at Siemens, isn't it?
And to be fair, there's no room for big egos. Maybe 10, 20 years ago there was, but now, the successful leaders in our business, they're not out for themselves. They're not out for the self-promotion, and that obviously goes on, but the ones who are really successful are the ones that are the ones that are pushing others and recognizing and rewarding and looking for opportunities for people to move around the organization and better themselves, and it's not just all about them.
It reminds me of the window mirror analogy. The old adage of poor leaders look in the mirror when something goes right and look through the window at others when things go wrong. Whereas great leaders look through the window when something goes right and they look in the mirror when something goes wrong. And if we can start thinking about that, for anybody listening, if you can start fostering that type of approach, you will receive so much buy-in and respect from your people. And that's enough for them to be mobilized and motivated and go again, right? And that's what we want to try and achieve. So just to summarize then, so already on the first 2 points, you are a culture vulture like me. Mm-hmm. You believe in cultures are what's going to allow us to sustain performance in organizations for a period of time, and attract talent and retain talent and all the other things that we talk about with culture. Leadership is the number one contributing factor to that. If you have a strong leadership team who are aligned and who are showing the right behaviors and leading in the right way, then your culture can be maintained, I think is what you're saying. So last question then, and we can we sort of debate this for a few minutes. What do you want? So in your environment, you have many teams. In fact, you have many shifts, you have many segments, right? It's a very, not complex, but it is in a way, you've got many teams within the team. So you've probably got a lot of subcultures, which means that certain segments and certain teams operate in a certain way and others maybe not so. And you know what? You can drive consistency, but sometimes it's driven by the leader in that area, right? Exactly. So you'll have high-performing teams and areas that you can spring to mind straight away. You'll have others that just do okay, and you'll have others that are a concern. I wanted to ask you about high-performing teams. What is it that you observe in the teams that perform well in the organization? It could be still leadership, it could be outside of that, but what drives a high-performing team, in your opinion?
I think it's a few things. I think it's having a united sense of purpose. So they're all aligned in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And hopefully that's aligned with what the company's sense of purpose is. You would hope.
Yeah. So they clearly understand why they are there.
Yeah.
What needs to be achieved at a macro level, but at a micro level, what their piece of the pie is.
Exactly how they fit in. So if it's like the old orchestra. You're playing a flute, but you're an important part of that music. And then the other thing is, I think, is trust. Is trusting in each other. And one of the successes that we've had is where, as an organisation, there's been quite a lot of initiatives outside of just the day job and making money, outside of delivering, which is are fantastic things that people really are passionate about. So I'll give you one example: our Pathways program, where we give young people with learning disabilities the opportunity to be able to come in and get some work experience and work as interns with us. So it gives our people the opportunity to mentor them, develop them, work with them. And it's been so successful. There's only about a 7% chance of someone with a learning difficulty getting a paid employment at any point in their lifetime, versus you and I, or anyone without a difficulty, is about 75%. And already we've got 4 of them paid employment.
Really?
So, I mean, just that, things like that people really buy into. They're proud to work for a company that does all of these types of things. And it's a little bit unusual as well. There's some things that raise a few eyebrows at times, but I think just that sense of working in a community of people that actually care about things is, again, it creates a team bond, and it just create a wider culture. You see people changing their behaviours. So if these young people are in the canteen, the swearing stops.
Yeah.
People care.
Yeah.
There's more disability awareness because obviously they're working with these individuals, and the charity that we're working with also delivers some training for us as well around that. So things like that, things that are just bigger than the day job, that people can buy into, get involved with, creates a bit of a wider culture of, actually, you know what, I know we're here this is a renewable company, and the big picture is that actually we're doing what's right for our environment and our planet and our future communities, but also internally as well, we're doing things for local communities that make a difference.
Yeah, and I get that then at a humanistic level, to come back to your point, if you're working within a team or department at a humanistic level, it allows you to connect with that purpose on a much more personal level than, now I'm not saying anybody who works for Siemens Wind Power is not here to save the planet, right?
No,
but let's face it, they're not all directly connected to that, right? But what they can connect to is when they see that individual who the organisation is given an opportunity to, and connect with it.
Yeah.
And the purpose becomes much more personal and bigger than, because I always say to companies, right, your purpose, every single one of your employees is not going to directly connect to your purpose.
Of course not.
They're not. They're just not.
It might be, we have to produce this many blades a week.
Yeah.
Something as simple as that.
And they'll do it, but they're not exactly overly passionate and emotional about it, right? They'll do it because it pays the bills and they're there to do a job. But where you can spark some connection, like the program you've just said, i.e. I'm part of something bigger here than 10 blades a week, that for me would come under employee engagement and culture. It's about how we feel different.
Yeah.
There's more to us than 10 blades a week, right? So I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. So to your first point, you're saying one of the things you observe in high performing teams is that when they feel like they are connected to the company's purpose, but at an individual level, they have purpose as well within.
And they're connected and respect the ethics and the activities that go on within the business. It's not just about, it's not all about making money. People come to work, yes, they've got mortgages to pay, but, maybe what the difference between putting in 100% and putting in 110% is about how you feel about your company and your manager on that day. And I think that's the other thing as well, is having managers and teams who behave consistently every day.
Yeah.
That we've talked about this before, but to my mind, if a manager is not mentally stable and can't control their own emotions and can't control themselves and can't manage themselves and lead themselves, how are they ever going to be able to manage a team?
I nicked one of your lines. We spoke at a conference together, didn't we? And you spoke before me, was that right?
Yeah.
And you said, why did we invest in a leadership program? Well, if people can't lead themselves, if leaders can't lead themselves, then they can't lead others.
Exactly.
And I thought, I bloody love that.
Yeah.
And I nicked it.
Thank you.
So I've been using it since. So yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely. And that's why, coming back to the start of this Hubcast, you started with culture is important, but the number one thing you got to get right is leadership. And then everything trickles down because they cast the cultural shadow. They do. They absolutely do.
Yeah.
So that's any other observations on high performing teams. Obviously the purpose bit and the feeling connected and the feeling leadership obviously is the other one. If you've got a great leader within the team, you've obviously got to have the right talent within the team as well.
Exactly. The trust between the team members, there's nothing if you haven't got the trust there. And obviously the ability to do the job as well.
You've got to have the skills. You've got to have the skills. Of course you do.
That's the easy bit.
Yeah. And that's what, to our point, that's what can be trained. Good leaders and great organizations can skill people.
Yeah.
What we can't do is give them personality transplants, right? So we've got to,
And as well, if people within that team can see a clear line of their own progression and they've got the, clarity of how they're going to get there and clarity that the business are going to help them and what that all looks like. I think that, again, it helps people to feel their place in an organization and feel where their future might be in an organization. So, you get less churn, you get established teams. And if the longer you can get a good team working together, it just gets stronger over time.
Yeah. Love it. Right. I'm going to ask you one last question because we have a lot of HR execs who are on the hub and who will be listening to this type of content. And one of the frustrations of HR leaders, or not frustrations, but one of the challenges that HR leaders face in organizations is dealing with performance or supporting managers who are trying to deal with, let's say, underperformance. The performance management zone that many call it. I call it the straight bat zone, don't I? But sometimes we can be caring as an organization. We can develop our people. We can have great leadership. We can do all we can to accommodate the success of an employee. And even at the end of the day, sometimes we either have the wrong people in the wrong roles, or we just have somebody who's got themselves in such a fixed or negative mindset behaviorally that they're just not right for the business and something's got to give. What I observe is there's a bit of a Mexican standoff going on in organizations. Managers believe it's HR's responsibility to lead on that. So they sort of chuck it over to HR. That's a HR thing now. HR leaders and partners are going, no, managers, it's your responsibility. We will support and advise you through the process. And it tends to not get dealt with. And a couple of things happen. We either don't deal with it quick enough and it becomes toxic in our teams and environments, or we move the problem. So we say, let's try this person in so-and-so's team, right? And then it happens again. Where do you stand on HR leaders and departments being strong in the performance management process and still reserving the right as a business to either improve people or exit them and move them on? Do you always believe it's our duty to try and accommodate and improve first and foremost? Or should we be strong in helping managers and supporting managers deal with performance in the moment? And where's the accountability? Is it dual? Is it in HR or is it with the manager? Go for it.
Oh gosh, this is.
And we've only got 6 minutes left, so you're gonna have to get straight to the point.
Right. Well, I think what makes a good leader is someone who can engage with people when they start to see a bit of a wobble, and really tease out the underlying issues and understand what the underlying issues are. And if they genuinely believe that this person is 100% wrong for this job, then nip it in the bud quickly.
Yeah.
Don't prolong the agony. Do something about it. I believe very firmly that the responsibility for managing the capability of team members sits with a manager.
Yeah, I agree.
I think HR are there to advise and guide and provide support, but at the end of the day, the decision of what happens with that individual is down to that manager, and the accountability of what happens is down to that manager.
And HR's role, therefore, is to ensure from an employment law perspective that manager is conducting themselves in the right manner, they're following the right processes. So should we make a decision, we have shown a duty of care and we've gone through the right process.
Partly,
yeah.
I think also HR's role is to be a moral compass, because it's really important that we treat our people in the right way. If we start to treat people in a way that's disrespectful and a way that is unethical, again, you might be compliant with the law, but at the end of the day, you have to go to bed at night as a manager and feel happy with what you've done. And if you're not, then something's gone wrong somewhere. So I think it's about always trying to find a win-win, not about moving the problem, but essentially trying to find out what the underlying issues are. Find out what the issues are early. Don't wait until you've had someone 6 months or a year or however long. And really search for that win-win. And sometimes that is that they're a round peg in a square hole, and sometimes it is that you have to let them go. And
they're tough decisions, but they're the ones that we have to make for the good and the protection of the business, right?
Absolutely.
Or the organisation. And I love that term moral compass, because HR should be sat independently as a moral compass, because managers, as impartial as they'd like to think they are, emotions take over. If so many things happen, their impartiality becomes skewed by their feeling or emotion towards that person. And sometimes we're not being fair, and and that's what HR's role is, just to make sure that we're not jumping to a conclusion, we're not getting caught up in cognitive dissonance or unconscious bias or whatever it might be,
and supporting that manager with we've talked about consistency, being consistent, not having favorites, making sure that you're treating everyone equally, not looking at someone with the halo or the horns type.
Absolutely. And that comes down to one of the final things that I always advise managers do, because I agree with you. The ownership and accountability is on the manager. HR are there as a moral compass, but they're also there from a support and guidance perspective to make sure we are following the right procedures.
And sometimes that's even helping that manager with the conversation, even being a role, even role playing it.
A soundboard before you go off and have the conversation.
Exactly. Pretend I'm that person and then talk to me. Just simple things like that.
And I always advise them, it's got to be based on two things and not just one. It's got to be my observational and behavioural feedback, but I've got to have some KPIs and measurements, if I can, to support the poor performance. So if I steam into a conversation and I say, I don't think you're doing a good job, and you go, well, I think I am. Right, where do we go from there then? Whereas if you go in and say, my observations are this, but look at the metrics or look at the outputs.
And ultimately, performance management is all about getting someone's performance up to where you need it to be and understanding how you can support them. And that should be the root of it.
That's the primary driver.
You don't go into it to try and manage someone out, which is the biggest mistake that managers do. I've had enough. I've dealt with it this long.
And then nothing's going to change their minds.
They're absolutely stuck in the minds now, and all they want to do is go through a process to manage them out. And then you've lost it then.
Of course you are.
You need to go out in it at an early stage where you're trying to get the performance up.
And that final point is a really important one. Performance management is not to manage people out. There's a misconception. It's always with the primary aim of improving individuals and finding a win. However, the byproduct of that is if we followed the right path and we've done the right things, there will come a time where we've got to say we've done all we can, right? Cool. Right, listen, we've got to wrap it up before we run out of time. But I could talk to you all day. It was fascinating, Carolyn. Thank you so much. Just for me, in a minute summary, culture is so important in organizations, just in terms of, if you focus too transactionally on operations and outputs and delivery, you will drive outcomes, but at what cost? If you start to form habitual and long-lasting patterns of behavior, belief, and mindset in your workforce, your culture will then manifest, and that performance has far more chance of being sustainable and have longevity. Leadership is the number one contributing factor to culture. It all falls in if we're not displaying the right behaviors and the right approaches from a leadership level. Leaders do carry the greatest influence, and we cast the cultural shadow down. High-performing teams, you talked about, when members of teams feel like they understand the overall purpose and it connects with their sense of purpose, then that's where the magic happens. And finally, for HR, all managers, HR people, all managers out there, let's not be afraid to deal with performance, but let's do it right. Let's have that moral compass. The ownership should be on the manager to deal with that, supported by HR. And the sole aim has to be to improve performance. And if not, then let's be firm and let's be strong, and we move on. With 40 seconds left, Carolyn Woolway, thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin.
And I hope you enjoyed that. And we will be back shortly with another T2 Hubcast. Thank you very much.